and good morning. Thank you for being here to cover an incredibly important topic to thousands of Georgians with intellectual and developmental disabilities who need assistance to join the community and receive quality services that the state is not providing. I'd like to introduce ourselves. My wife, Lisa Woody, and I'm Philip Woody, the father of Evan Woody, a 21-year-old Dunwoody High School special needs student who suffered a traumatic brain injury at 18 months. As a result, he lost 20% of his brain, and his brainstem was crushed. Evan now has a 3-year-old cognitive equivalency, and we perform all of his basic living skills like bathing, dressing, shaving, eating, and toileting. He's nonverbal, but he has such a wonderful spirit that blesses everyone he meets. During my talk, I want you to remember two numbers, the numbers 7,000 and 188. So keep those numbers in mind. Now, let me tell you about a time when names like Willowbrook and Villageville sent chills down the spine of families with disabilities. These are the infamous examples that were exposed for the appalling conditions that waited for children like Evan. As this appalling treatment of children would have been in his future. And because of that, strong, caring people went to work in the 70s and 80s to make it better. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law by George H.W. Bush because he took a bold step. He took a bold step on behalf of the disabled community, and that's what we need today. We need bold leadership in the state of Georgia. Just as it requires action, just as it required action in legislation and leadership then, we are at just that same point in history today. Every year for the past 10 years, Georgia has funded only 2% of the waiting list of thousands, leaving 98% of Georgians with disabilities year after year without critical community services. The state of Georgia is also now taking away important services from 188 Georgians with disabilities who require 24-hour care and are in jeopardy of having to move out of their homes and into settings where they will not get the level of care they need. As for Evan, he's been on the waiting list for over 10 years. The waiting list is currently at 7,000. When we checked with the EDHDD last summer and asked them when they think Evan will receive the waiver for home and community services, my wife remembers the director telling us, at this rate, you'll never get it. You're going to hear today, after I speak, from someone who has the waiver, someone who has the waiver, and from me, you'll hear what it means to not have the waiver. So what is the impact on Evan and thousands of others like him who are not getting the now top Medicaid waiver? What it means is that, just like back in the 70s, when Americans with disabilities were out of sight and out of mind, this is what his future looks like without the waiver. But today it's another form of out of sight and out of mind. But for my wife and I, he is not out of sight and he's not out of mind. He's always in our hearts. But what we know from our neighbors and our church and people in the community who love Evan, folks like Evan, what all Georgians want is that they don't want this community to be out of sight and out of mind. This can change on our watch, but we need your help. Now let me put this in real dollars. It means our family having to pay tens of thousands of dollars every year to help Evan live in the community. The cost is insurmountable. And it's not just insurmountable for our family. This is what all families who need a waiver are facing. Is this the best that we can do for a child, a parent who loves their child so dearly? The answer is no, and we can't do better. I'd also like to state that this issue is not a partisan issue. It is not a partisan issue. It's a human issue. My friends, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, they all support this. This is what they want for the families of Georgia. And as State Representative Michael Walensky said last year during the morning order, he said, I firmly believe that the moral test of government is how the government treats children, elderly, the needy, sick, and the handicapped. So Georgia decision makers, do the right thing do the moral thing and fully fund the waiting list in 5. Fully fund in 5. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Callie and Brianna.
Good morning. My name is Brianna, and I'm here to support my sister, Callie Moore. Communication is very difficult for Callie. She and I have agreed that mine will be the voice you hear this morning. But the message is hers. Her story is important for you to hear because Callie is proof that when based on the needs of the person, waiver services work. That's why we're here. We want to say loudly for everyone to hear that waivers work and everyone who needs them should have them. Waiver services should be based on the needs of the individual. We want our state leaders to give us a break. We want the waivers fully funded in 5 years. The comp waiver was developed to give people with disabilities the opportunity to live full lives in their communities and not forced to live in facilities. There was even a landmark court case in Georgia, the Olmstead decision, that said no to forcing people into state hospitals, nursing facilities, and other group settings. Every Georgian deserves the right to live in their own community. Callie is able to do that because of comp nursing. Because of comp, Callie is able to live in an apartment near UGA. Go Dogs! She has a roommate to share her expenses, and her life is a lot like many 26-year-olds. She lives in a college town. Since the pandemic, Callie has learned to use Zoom. She took a drama class online and keeps in touch with friends and other advocates using her iPad. She shops. She pays bills. She goes to church and restaurants. She votes. And she has a membership at the Y. She hangs out with her friends, safely of course, and loves to people watch downtown, much like me. She loves to roll around her town and post pictures on social media. If you've never seen Athens in the spring, Callie recommends a visit to North Campus for the Botanical Gardens on South Village Avenue. The blooms are amazing right now. Callie's life isn't always sunshine and flowers though. Callie has cerebral palsy, epilepsy, a cortical vision impairment, and lots of other diagnoses. She takes 28 different medications and has been hospitalized more times than we want to count, right? She has a feeding tube, an IV port, and her entire spine is fused with rods and wires because of scoliosis. She always has emergency oxygen nearby because we never know when she'll need help breathing. She's almost lost her life many times, including her fight last summer with COVID. Comp provided around-the-clock, individualized care in her own home. Sadly, these life-saving services are in jeopardy now. The Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, which runs the COP waiver, wants to reduce funding. There are 188 people, including Callie, who have been told their services will be cut in spite of their medical or behavioral needs. These 188 will be forced into group homes or other facilities. They will lose their independence, their communities, and if we're being honest, some will lose their lives. This is wrong. DBHDD and the Department of Community Health have said these cuts are necessary to fund services for people on the waiting list. In other words, they are asking to take funds from one group of people with disabilities and give it to another. Taking this from people who need it is wrong. Failing to provide care is wrong. To have 7,000 people on the waiting list, especially in Georgia, which has the means to provide these services, is wrong. For that reason, we are doing everything we can to ensure that current comp recipients keep their services and that all Georgians get the comp services they need. In-home, individualized comp services would be a reality for all who need them. We finance what we value. We are asking our governor and our legislators to show they value all Georgians, including the 188 and the 7,000. It's time to give us a break and fully fund the comp waiver in 5 years. Thank you.
My name is Don McLaughlin. I'm a pastor in Atlanta for the last 24 years. And I'm here with Evan Woody, my friend, and his mom and dad, and Evan's friends. And you've heard what we're asking for. We're asking this state to do what's right in regard to the 188. We're asking this state right now to do what's right in regard to 7,000. But I know it's what the state wants to do. See, I've known Evan for over 20 years. And I know Evan's friends, I know Evan's neighborhood. And I know how people love him and how he loves them. I'm a part of Evan's church. I see how he interacts with the people and encourages the people in our church, and I see how they encourage him. Evan is a Georgian. Evan's not a partial Georgian. He's a Georgian. He's a citizen of this community, a citizen of this city, and a citizen of this state, and he deserves, as with his friends, our best. And what we're offering is not our best, and we know it. One of our friends called me on the phone and in a heartbroken voice suggested that she was considering moving to another state. She was born here, raised here. She's raising her 2 children that are on the spectrum. She's raising them here, but she was looking to move to another state to find a state that better supported her family. No Georgian should have to look outside this great state to find the care they not only need, but assuredly deserve. Now, you heard the story. There's people on the waiting list. Evan, 10 years. The wisdom of old from Scripture says, hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. Why would we make a heart that is already bearing a unique challenge? Why would we make that heart sick by telling them to wait longer? Oh, I've watched this family right up close. What have I seen over the last 20 years? Courage and compassion. What does this family want to see, along with our friends here today? What do we want to see out of our state leaders? The same thing. Follow Evan's lead. Courage and compassion. Now, you can look at the research. You know that economically this makes sense. Companies that want to relocate here, they want their employees to know what kind of a state we are, who we care for, what we value, who we value. But that's not why we're here. It's not because it makes economic sense, it's because it makes moral sense. That same wisdom of old reminded the rulers of that day. If you want to do what's right, you raise your voice for the people that can't raise their own voice. We want this fully funded in 5, and we need help, we need our governor, we need our legislators to demonstrate courageous compassion, and we need it today.
Good morning. I'm Senator Sally Harrell, and I couldn't be more proud to be here today. I'm right where I need to be, and you are right where you need to be today, together, and tomorrow. I was a young mother with a newborn baby, serving in the Georgia House of Representatives when I first heard of the plight of families living with disabilities. When I looked at my own newborn baby, whom I toted around 50 that session, I knew that this too could easily be me. Everything about my baby looked right, but was it? The stories I heard that year made an impact on me that I will never forget. That was in the early 2000s, just after the U.S. Supreme Court's 1999 Olmstead decision found that the unjustified segregation of people with disabilities was a form of unlawful discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act. There was a big campaign back then to unlock the waiting list. There was energy, and people were charged up, and I expected progress. I then left politics to raise my own children, and in 2018, I returned to the Georgia Senate. During my first term in the Senate, I was shocked to hear that there was still a waiting list for Medicaid waivers to support living in communities. During this time, my own children had grown from being babies to young adults, an entire generation, and the waiting list was still there. I learned that instead of families waiting for a slot to open up, families were waiting for an emergency to strike, because that was the only way to get a slot. This is not okay. Which is why I introduced Senate Bill 208, which puts forth a plan to eliminate the waiting list for now incumbent waivers over the next 5 years, and to eliminate caps for community living support services. Following the close of this year's legislative session, Governor Kemp will begin working on his budget for fiscal year 2022 to 23. In order to fully fund now incumbent waivers in 5 years, the governor needs to fund around 1,800 waiver slots, rather than the typical 100 funded each year. If we keep this commitment for 5 consecutive years, there will be no waiting list. And people will be living in their communities with the supports they need, just as the Olmstead decision said they should back in 1999. What I've learned this year, after a small tax cut eliminated $140 million in state revenue, the exact amount needed to fund all 7,000 waiting list slots, now and forever, is that this struggle to fund the waiting list is not due to a lack of resources. It is due to a lack of political will. And we must work to change that. The governor knows that the pandemic hit families living with disabilities very, very hard. Now it's time for us to ask him to give us a break and provide full funding in 5 years, because it's the right thing to do, and now
we're open to Q&A. And so if anyone has any questions. Yes, sir.
Has anyone approached the U.S. Justice Department or otherwise considered going back into court to try to force compliance?
I don't know that anybody has, but I know that it's been talked about by the community. You know, after being on the waiting list for 10 years and seeing that the state only funds as little as 2% of the waiting list every year, something has to be done. You know, we've had people who have met with legislators, 50 legislators last legislative session, not this one. And still, you know, the results are the same. So I think that that's a definite option. I hope it doesn't come to that.
What would it cost to fully fund it over the 5-year period?
When I calculated it, it was exactly the same as the $140 million to fund 7,000 slots. So I believe that's what the annual budget would be.
Yes?
Can you talk about right now what it takes to move up the waiting list or get services?
Yeah. Just trying to get a few different voices here.
Carolyn, who now has the comp waiver, was on the waiting list for 15 years. So sometimes it's patience. And the system is supposed to be set up so that the most in need get the services that they need when they need them. But that's just not the way things happen. I think it was the question about what is this going to cost. I feel like I should also say that it's hard to gauge that because it's not just a matter of 7,000 people. It's a matter of 7,000 individuals with individual needs. Of those 7,000 people, there are a handful of people who, like Callie, are going to need very, very intensive supports to be able to live in their communities. And then there are other people who are going to need some vocational support to be able to pursue the job of their dreams. So it's hard to, you know, we have to talk about numbers, and I know that, but I just want to make that point that it's important that we keep the people in mind, the individuals in mind, and I just believe we can do this.
You know, just further to answer your question. So if there are 100 slots that are allocated a year, that means 100 people get about 7,000. So who gets those? From what I've heard and talking to folks who've gotten the waiver, it's either because, and also talking with DBHD, it's because there are individuals that are homeless, medically fragile, you know, dire straits, if you will. But then also families who send emails and call day after day, week after week, just pleading with the DBHDD, we need help. And it really shouldn't be that way. Just like the state offers, you know, free education to every child in the state, there should also be, you know, the state offering, you know, these services to all people in need. Shouldn't be a, yes, that's it.
The question was, you know, how to work getting off the waiting list. This gentleman over here has been on the waiting list for 12 years, and his answer to that question is that's what we'd like to know. In terms of cost, remember that this is also cost to the state. This is a Medicaid waiver, so there is federal money available. The cost of the 100 slots that are in the budget this year is $2 million, so that's approximately $20,000 worth of state funding per individual, but that brings down Medicaid match to federal dollars as well.
Any other questions? No? Yes. Sure.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Lee Jenny from Columbus, Georgia, and trying to get here, we need to start with just making the Capitol accessible for those with disabilities. It took me 15 minutes to make a full circle, like I just had to do. qualifications to move up the list is what we're facing. I have a young child. He is 9 with autism, and I'm physically disabled. So as his needs grow, my health is declining. So that is another stark reality that we have to face. Another thing that many people are not aware of, we're the lucky ones. We got on the list. In Columbus, there are people who have mental health and developmental disabilities that are not being taken care of, period. They get passed between developmental disabilities and mental health. That's wrong. They get no services. They do not get on this waiver. And we need to stop passing that buck. Thank you.
Is that all the questions? Thank you, everyone, for coming, the press, as well as